Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.
I'd love your response to this now that we're talking to the whole of the state. Do we need to make, more information available, is what I'm going to say, more information available on all of these renewable projects? Do we need to do that? So give us a call on 1300 222 702 or send me a text. So because of the financial windfall from these projects flowing into the community as a whole, rather than just individual landowners, what's happening in your community? Love to hear from you. Now, if you're living near one of these solar and wind farms, it'd be more money going into the community infrastructure, help ease the tension where you see that sort of division. So I'd love your response to it. And depending on who you listen to and their political bent, there's resistance to renewable energy projects in regional Australia. Well, that might not be right. Well, rural councils are calling for a greater role in the transition to this new form, or new forms of energy production, solar and wind primarily. Makes sense to say no one understands local issues better than rural councils, and often the proponents of the infrastructure forget to speak to the council, and that could well be a very large mistake. Well, the Mayor of Dubbo is on the line for a chat. That's Matthew Dickinson. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Tim. How are you going?
Yeah, good. Makes perfect sense to me. If you're going to do something in a rural community, you better ask the local council, shouldn't you?
Well, it's interesting. When you say that councils would like a greater role, I'm not sure that we want a greater role in terms of the consent process, but we want better outcomes, I suppose. So I may be being a little bit pedantic there with the language, but we certainly don't want to be the ones that are doing the approvals. They're very complex, they're very large. We simply don't have the staff at local councils, and Dubbo is obviously a larger one, but some of the smaller councils, there's no way they would have the staff to be able to process some of these applications. But certainly, you mentioned the word windfall there. That is a real challenge for us as a council, for regional councils in general, to make sure that we do get a windfall, because we don't necessarily get a windfall. And that is the real challenge for us, because when they go through the state government, the state significant development process that they go through with the Department of Planning, then there's no money that has to be paid to a local council, to a local community. It's our job to negotiate with those individual proponents to try and deliver as much money as we can for our local community. And we're doing that, and I think we're going okay at that. But certainly we'd like to have that legislated where those proponents knew that that was a part of doing business, the cost of doing business, if you like.
Yeah, how many of these, and let's call them large, renewable projects, and let's say, stick to solar and wind primarily, do you have in that area of yours?
Well, the proposals that will go forward we're in the Central West Arana Renewable Energy Zone. The proposals that are at various states of the progress they're going through number approximately 37. So there's a lot.
Gee.
We'll provide out of our res about 42% of the power for the state once it's finished. So that's fantastic. That's fantastic for the transition to renewables. It's great for climate change, and it should be great for our community in terms of that windfall, in terms of those dollars that we'll receive. But one of the challenges that we have, Tim, is that we've got to sit down with each of those 37 different proponents and say, we'd like some money for our community, please, and we'll smile nicely, and they can say, sure thing, or they can say, no. They only have to prove to the state government that they've had some discussions with the local council, but there's no mandated amount. So we've actually created our own framework, which is being used by other councils. In fact, we've even shared it with the federal government, because we think there's a role here for the federal government and the state government to play. But we have said we think 1.5% of the capital investment value, the cost of the project, as a community benefits fund is a reasonable number. Now, let's put that in perspective. One of the biggest projects, for example, is a project that's about $2 billion, about over 109 wind turbines in that project. So that would mean 1.5%, $30 million, and then we want that spread over the life of the project. So, for example, $1 million a year with indexation then over the 30 years of that project. We can take advantage of that money and deliver some great benefits for our community with that kind of money from one project. Now, that's a larger one, but we might end up with, for example, if our 1.5% successful, $10 million a year that we can spend in our community. Or we could end up with zero. And that's the real challenge for us. How do we make sure we get hold of that money for our community?
Now, Graham in Orange, you've sent me a text. I'd love you to call and expand on what you're saying. 1300 222 702 if you'd like to call. If you don't want to call, that's fine. But he's saying we feed our city counterparts, we clothe them, we water them, and now we power them, all at the expense of the regions. Please ask the Mayor, what benefits do we get in regional New South Wales for destroying our environment to save theirs? No one in regional New South Wales wants this in their backyard, says Graham in Orange.
And again, it does come down to that financial side. If we accept the fact that it's going to happen, and some people have said to me in our community, can you please stop these? And we don't have the power.
Yep.
We simply are not the consent authority, so I don't get the chance to say no to them. We have to accept, so our council, the decision we've made as a council is we've said we accept the transition is going to happen. So now we accept that. What can we do with it? What's the best thing we can do? And to Graham's point, we see the best thing we can do is to make sure that we deliver financial benefits for our community. And we're being innovative in some of the things we're trying to do. So, for example, we've got a proposal for a thing called a REACT Centre, Renewable Energy Awareness and Career Training Centre. And we got the idea from the Parkes Telescope, from the Snowy Hydro Discovery Scheme. Those two, for example, projects have a visitor centre that has 100,000 in Parkes' case or 150,000 in the Snowy Hydro case. Visitors go through there and visit there. And the Parkes dish, I love the Parkes dish, but it's not that exciting. You look at it, it's a 50-tonne dish. Now, there's a whole bunch of science behind that which is fascinating, but it doesn't do much. You're looking at it and you're saying, when does it do something? It doesn't actually do much. It does move very slowly, but 100,000 visitors a year go to that particular visitor experience centre. So we believe there's a place to play for a similar centre, a similar facility in Wellington. This wouldn't be in Dubbo, it would be down at the Wellington end of our LGA. Right. And 100,000 visitors a year is fantastic, but the way we're getting the proponents interested in this is we're putting training as a significant part of that. So we've already got 4 of the proponents to give us $50,000 each to build the feasibility case for this particular facility. So you've got to be a bit creative. They're not coming to us and government's not coming to us saying, how about this great idea with a visitor centre to really boost your economy? We've got to come up with these different proposals and try and work out ways we can make benefits from these.
On Graham's point that no one wants any of this in regional New South Wales, I mean, it depends on who you listen to and what their political bent is, whether that's true or not. What's the case in Dubbo? Maybe is it the case that someone says, well, yeah, I'll cop it, I'll have a renewable energy system, I'll have solar, I'll have wind farms, whatever, on my property, and the neighbour says, well, no, I hate that. I mean, how much of that actually goes on? How much of that is true?
Let me be a bit dangerous here, Tim, and I'll paraphrase, and I know there's going to be some residents that will be disappointed with what I'm about to say because it's not the case with all cases, but let me just paraphrase. I find the majority of people that are going to end up having some renewable infrastructure on their farm, and they can say yes and no, so they don't have to take it, but when they do say yes, they've just drought-proofed their property. They might end up with, let's say they have 5 turbines on their property, they might end up with off-farm income of around about 150 grand, because you might get 30 grand per turbine. So that means in a year of drought, they know they've got a guaranteed minimum amount of money coming in, they can keep their farm running. So for those farmers that make the decision, and it is their decision, to put some renewable infrastructure on their farm, they think they're fantastic. And I've spoken to farmers and say, this is the greatest thing ever. My farm now is much more manageable and I've taken a lot of stress out of my life. And then on the flip side of that, you've got people who might live near it and they don't like the look of the solar panels or the wind turbines. For whatever reason, that's a personal decision they make that they don't like the look of it. And some of those people are very much against those. So you do get people who are very close to it, who are for strongly or against strongly. But then if you go to the wider community and walk down the main streets of Wellington and Dubbo and say to people, what do you think about the renewables? Most people go, oh, yeah, I suppose it's happening and hopefully we get something good out of it. So I think, I don't think Graham's quite right in saying no one wants them. The farmers that have got their infrastructure want them. The businesses that are getting extra business out of it want them. The employees that we're getting out of them, we're estimating around 6,000 employees will be the peak in about 5 years' time out of these renewable projects. So the employees that are getting paid money out of them want them, but there are some people who are very passionate and who don't want them, and that's democracy that we live in.
I'll ask you another question in a tick, but Brad wants to talk to us. G'day, Brad.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. What's going on?
I'm part of a project in my hometown at Manila, in just out past Tamworth, and we've been putting together a solar farm for the last 8 years as far as getting it going. We're going to be the first, or one of the first, community-owned solar farms. Will also, which means people in our community contribute to the cost of the build. It'll power our community. It's a 4.9 megawatt system with a battery that will pump back into the community at certain times of the evening.
Yeah.
And we also got another part of our project that will put funds back into our community through community projects. We've got two arms of our project.
Yeah. So, any drama around Manila and Tamworth with this project of yours? Are you getting much blowback? No.
No. Very, very little. We've from the start we've worked with our community. We've worked with Tamworth, the council, and they're very supportive. And we've also got a little bit of a kick in from the government. They gave us $3.5 million towards the project. It's an $18.5 million project. So, it's pretty expensive. Not everyone's got that money in their back pocket.
Yeah. And when will that be up and running?
Well, we're looking to start infrastructure very shortly, and we're still in the fundraising side of it. We have raised a certain amount of funds, but we need some more. And
all right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Brad. No, I appreciate your call. Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
And,
thank you.
And Matthew, speaking of blowback, here's another text that says, if there's no issue with all of this, why not put all of this stuff in the thousands of acres of national park near the cities and up high in the wind and the sun, wait for the protest to start? Well, I can't imagine you'll see them in the national park. There's probably rules and regulations around that. But this, whole idea that, regional New South Wales has got to cop all of this, well, that's simply logistics, Matthew, isn't it? Because you've got the ground out there, whether people like it or don't like it, and I know some don't. I mean, this is where they're going to probably have to be, because not much room in the city, because there's not much room for people in the city, let alone anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I love Brad's story there. One of the things that I think we need to look at, Tim, is that it's a new economy. The old world economy that Australia had, where we dig up stuff and sell it to the world, that's going to, well, you get to the bottom eventually. If you keep digging up stuff, you get to the bottom of the hole. But we need to be a bit cleverer in what we do with things. And we've got a huge resource called land and space. Yeah. So there's nothing stopping us developing the power that we need for our own economy in this whole new economy, and then slowly get to the stage where we start saying, well, we can start to generate power maybe at the top end of Australia that we can then send in underwater electricity cables across the ocean to some of our neighbouring countries above us. And there's certainly potential there, I suppose. But we've got to first of all say, Tim, this is a new economy. This is a new world we're living in. How can we take advantage of it? And from our perspective as a council, we've got to try and be progressive and take action to benefit our residents. There's no good us sticking our heels in saying, no, we don't want to accept this. We want the old world. We like the old world. We don't want change. And then next thing you know, we blink and the world's gone past us.
Yeah, I'm speaking with Matthew Dickerson, the Mayor of Dubbo. Well, Jeff says, I'm in the regions in Bathurst, and Graham speaks for himself. We have renewables around us and near us, and many proposed. It's a very noisy group who are opposed to not most of the people from my observation. That's Jeff, who lives in Bathurst. And somebody else says, lots of text here, solar farms are okay, but wind farms are a blight on the landscape. Yeah, well, that's a little bit different, because to generate enough power, you have to have a lot of those wind turbines. Do you have many of those projects around you in Dubbo?
Yeah, definitely we do. There's one that was put in many years ago with 33 turbines, but we've got more coming. But it's interesting because, and this is where opinion is so divided, Tim, some people say, look at those wind turbines, they're majestic, they just turn slowly, and one turbine might power 3,000 homes. They're so beautiful. And then other people talk about the solar panels as being a terrible blight because you're taking up so much land area and turning that into what was farming land, maybe into production of power. Other people are the opposite. They're quite happy with the solar panels but don't like the turbines. But this is what we live in. We live in a world where people have their opinions, and that's okay.
Yeah, we love yours too. 0467 922 702 is the text line, and I know a lot of you prefer to text, but if you want to ring, that's fine too. In fact, we love it. 1300 222 702. And Liz says, I saw a farm in northern New South Wales where the solar panels in the fields, and they noted the sheep used them for shade during the summer, and the grass under the panels was healthier out in the open and provided food for the sheep. So, look, there's positives all over the place, and I imagine in the minds of many there are negatives too, but I think, as you say, Matthew, I don't really think there's a hell of a lot of point in railing against it because it's here and it's only going to increase as the years go by, as we head towards this renewable energy future. And, you know, you can complain about it all you like, but it's on the way. In fact, it's here, isn't it?
It is. And if you spend a lot of energy and time railing against it, as you say, then you might miss opportunities. And we've got an advanced wastewater treatment that we're putting in with one of the proponents paying for that. We're going to take our sewage treatment plant and our water that comes out of that, which at the moment we use on a farm that we own. We're going to get a renewable proponent to treat that to a high enough level. We'll be able to use that to water our sporting fields. They'll pay for the entire project because they need water. They'll have access to that water for the first 5 years. The community of Dubbo will have access to that water forevermore.
Okay.
So those are the type of things you need to look for.
Good question, this, and I imagine it's in the thoughts of many. What's your thoughts, Matthew, on building solar farms on food-producing land? Should that be happening? So, in other words, replacing the food-producing with the solar farms or wind farms, or can they coexist?
Wind farms, absolutely. What I love about wind farms is that you take up a small amount of area with the pad and you can keep grazing sheep and cattle around that. And because they're in hilly areas, they mostly are sheep and cattle. Solar farms are a bit different, and Liz talked about that example there where sheep are grazing between them. If it's a sheep grazing farm, then there's some research being done right now as we speak by one of the solar farms here at a university to see what the carrying capacity of that farm might be with solar panels. The number they've been talking about is maybe about 70%. So you only lose 30% of your capacity to carry sheep, and the wool quality at this stage, early stages, appears to be slightly better quality, so you're probably not missing too much. The big one is if you've got a wheat farm, for example, you obviously can't grow wheat when you put solar panels on there. So that's when you do lose that production of food if you do go to a solar farm, and that's where some people are pretty unhappy about solar.
How much of a concern is that in Dubbo?
We've probably got
in and around Dubbo.
Yeah, we've probably got more wind that's happening. There are certainly some solar farms, but those solar farms haven't been on wheat. Generally, haven't been on wheat properties. Haven't been on properties that are used for planting a crop as such. They've been more used around ones that have been grazing sheep. So you can't graze cattle, but you can still graze sheep. So again, for some people, it's been a very big issue. But for the general public, there's not enough of those that are really having a major impact. And can we adapt? Can we work out ways, for example, this research I mentioned, can we work out ways that we can actually adapt to the new environment and still have some sort of farming enterprise with a solar farm?
My listeners are great. They can be very funny. Rick says, I miss when whinging was un-Australian. Bring on the renewable revolution, says says Rick. Yeah, look, and lots of text messages about these. More objections there are against renewable energy, the greater the chances are of a coalition government. And the topic then will be nuclear in your backyard. And again, the regions will be hosting them. So that's from Dermot. It's an interesting discussion to have, Matthew, isn't it? It really is.
Very, very much so. And I do say to people sometimes, if they don't like the look of solar or don't like the look of wind, the alternative in the old days used to be a great big coal mine, a big open pit coal mine, which looks not fantastic in my opinion, and then a coal-fired power station spewing out pollution into the environment. So what do you prefer, a wind turbine looking off into the distance or smoke coming out of a coal-fired power station? And I think most people accept that we are changing. They sometimes just don't want the change to be in their backyard, Tim.
No, that's it, the NIMBYism. I guess finally, when it comes to all of this, and I think the Minister was the one who said it, that, you know, if you're establishing one of these infrastructure projects, whether it's solar, wind or anything else in a regional part of New South Wales, it's probably pretty smart to have a chat to the local council and people like yourself because you know the local area better than anyone else.
Yeah, that's right. I'd certainly encourage all of those proponents to be engaged with council, and we want to come up with creative solutions. We've got to come up with creative solutions around where they can accommodate their people. The example I gave with water before, how do we supply or how do they get the water they need? Can council benefit from that? all of these different solutions. We suggested to one proponent that they've got employees at the moment that they're flying in and out. Why don't they open up an office in Wellington? And so they opened up an office there. So you've got these different areas that we think we can make a difference in to benefit our community overall. So absolutely, I'd encourage them always to talk to their local council, even though, again, as I said, the consent authority is the state government.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks for the chat. I very much appreciate it. Thanks.
Always my pleasure, Tim.
That's Matthew Dickinson, who's the Mayor of Dubbo, and some of you like very much what he's had to say, some of you don't. That's democracy.
Mayoral Memo with Matthew Dickinson from Dubbo Regional Council.